What happens when television crosses a line? It was never meant to cross. In the 70s, network horror dared to explore madness, religion, and violence that once belonged only to theaters. These were movies made for the living room, yet they scarred viewers for life. Tonight, we dig into 10 shocking TV horror films that went way too far and forever changed what small screen terror could be. Number 10. Bad Ronald, 1974. On paper, Bad Ronald sounded like just another psychological thriller. A lonely teenager bullied and misunderstood retreats into fantasy after a tragic accident. But audiences were not ready for what came next. The film begins with Ronald Wilby, a socially awkward boy dominated by his controlling mother. When he accidentally kills a young girl, he hides the body in panic. His mother conceals the crime by building a secret room inside their home, turning Ronald into a ghostly presence that watches life unfold from behind the walls. As the story unfolds, Ronald begins slipping into a delusional world of his own creation, where he imagines himself a heroic prince, and the family that moves into his house becomes unwilling subjects in his twisted fairy tale. ABC's censors were horrified by the claustrophobic violence, the voyeurism, and the implication of a teenage killer lurking within suburban walls. Rumors spread that local stations refused to re-air it, fearing it could inspire real crimes. Parents called it sick television, but teenagers whispered about it for years, passing VHS copies as forbidden relics. Behind the scenes, the crew shot the wall sequences using tight, crawling camera angles that gave viewers vertigo. Lead actor Scott Jacoby later admitted that even he struggled to separate the fantasy from the madness during filming. Decades later, Bad Ronald became a cult legend, influencing modern thrillers about hidden intruders and unseen neighbors. It is not just a movie about fear, but about isolation and the dark places loneliness can take a human mind. Number 9. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, 1973. When Don't Be Afraid of the Dark aired on ABC, millions expected a mild, supernatural diversion. What they got instead was a nightmare so unsettling that many refused to watch television horror ever again. The film follows Sally Farnham, a young woman who inherits a gloomy Victorian mansion. She disobeys warnings about a locked fireplace and unwittingly releases demonic creatures that crawl through vents, whisper her name, and drag her toward their world. No blood, no gore. Yet the terror was relentless. Those whispering voices calling Sally again and again felt far too real for a network broadcast. Viewers wrote letters to ABC demanding the film never air again. Psychologists debated whether its depiction of unseen evil preying on isolation could traumatize children. Behind the scenes, director John Newland pushed lighting and sound design to extremes rarely seen on TV. The dwarfish demons were played by full-sized actors in oversized sets, giving their movements a disturbing, unnatural rhythm. The claustrophobic framing and heavy shadows defied the clean look of 70s television. When it re-aired in syndication, the networks cut scenes where Sally's sanity breaks under the demonic whispers. Even that could not erase its legacy. Decades later, Guillermo del Toro cited it as one of his greatest influences and produced a feature remake that tried but never matched the uncanny horror of the original broadcast. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark taught audiences that fear did not need to scream. It could whisper, it could breathe behind the walls and wait until you were alone. Number 8. Trilogy of Terror, 1975. Few TV movies have left scars like Trilogy of Terror. When it aired on ABC, it seemed like just another anthology. But one of its 3 tales crossed a line that no one expected, and television horror was never the same. The film starred Karen Black in 3 separate roles. The first 2 segments were eerie psychological pieces, but it was the final story, Amelia, that burned into pop culture memory. Amelia brings home a small Zuni fetish doll carrying a warning that if its golden chain breaks, an ancient hunter spirit will be released. Naturally, the chain breaks and chaos begins. The half hour that followed was a relentless chase through Amelia's apartment. No commercial breaks could soften the assault. The doll shrieked, stabbed, bit, and hunted its victim like an animal possessed. The camera angles were disorienting, the screams uncomfortably human, and the final twist horrifying. Network executives were terrified by how intense the result was. Internal memos warned against scheduling it before late-night hours. Parents' groups claimed the final possession scene would cause nightmares. Ratings spiked anyway. Behind the scenes, the Zuni doll was operated using stop-motion effects mixed with real-time puppetry. Karen Black performed nearly every stunt herself and admitted she was emotionally drained by the time filming wrapped. Critics dismissed it as trash television, but audiences could not forget it. Trilogy of Terror became an underground benchmark for televised horror. Even without explicit content, it demonstrated how sound pacing and suggestion could conjure pure panic. To this day, that tiny Zuni doll remains one of the most terrifying creations ever unleashed on American television. Number 7. The Night Stalker, 1972. Before The X-Files, before Supernatural, there was The Night Stalker, a made-for-TV movie that looked harmless at first, yet became one of the most shocking television broadcasts of its decade. The story follows Carl Kolchak, a cynical newspaper reporter in Las Vegas who stumbles upon a series of murders, each victim drained of blood. Police dismiss the idea of a vampire, but Kolchak's investigation uncovers something far darker. A killer named Janos Skorseny is not merely human, he is immortal and hungry. When it premiered, ABC executives expected mild ratings. Instead, viewers were paralyzed. The level of violence was extreme for prime time. Police gunfire, blood-dripping fangs, and an ending where the hero is silenced by political cover-up. Critics called it reckless. Religious groups accused it of glorifying evil. Behind the scenes, writer Richard Matheson adapted an unpublished novel by Jeff Rice, tightening it into a script that felt too real for TV. Producer Dan Curtis shot the Las Vegas streets like a noir nightmare, filled with flickering neon and dead eyes. Network censors demanded cuts, but the crew resisted. The final broadcast still carried a tone of pure dread. The Night Stalker broke records for TV viewership and birthed a new kind of horror. It was not about monsters and castles, but monsters hiding under fluorescent lights. Its success led to a sequel and later a short-lived series, but nothing matched the electric fear of that first broadcast. To this day, its legacy echoes through modern horror journalism. It showed that truth could be stranger and scarier than fiction, and that sometimes the real monster is the institution that covers it up. Number 6. Gargoyles, 1972. Gargoyles sounded almost silly on paper. A group of scientists stumble upon ancient winged creatures buried in the American Southwest. But when it aired, viewers were struck silent. The creatures were not cartoonish. They were disturbingly real. The story begins with an anthropologist and his daughter investigating demonic fossils in a desert canyon. When the sun sets, the gargoyles awaken. Their leathery wings flap through dark skies, their voices echoing like ancient chants. The father and daughter realize they have uncovered the living descendants of demons banished from heaven. The special effects were groundbreaking for television. Stan Winston designed the creatures long before his fame with Aliens and Jurassic Park. He used latex and animatronics to create faces that twitched, breathed, and blinked. ABC's executives warned the production team to tone it down, but Winston refused. The result was too realistic for comfort. Audiences were divided. Some praised its mythic tone, others called it blasphemous. Churches protested depictions of fallen angels portrayed sympathetically. Even critics admitted the film's moral ambiguity, whether the gargoyles were villains or victims, was unsettling. Behind the scenes, the desert shoot was grueling. Winds tore through sets, and the rubber suits became suffocating under the heat. Actors fainted between takes. Yet what emerged was a haunting meditation on creation and extinction. Over the years, gargoyles became a touchstone for creature design. It proved that even low-budget television could rival the imagination of cinema when driven by vision. Its monsters were not just beasts. They were reflections of humanity's oldest fear, the fear that something ancient still watches from the dark. Number 5. Satan's School for Girls, 1973. In the early 70s, networks loved gothic thrillers with female leads, but Satan's School for Girls crossed the line between camp and nightmare. The film follows Elizabeth Sayers, who transfers to an elite private academy after her sister's mysterious death. She soon discovers a secret cult hiding behind the school's polished corridors. Students disappear, professors whisper forbidden words, and every night, Candles burn in the basement, where masked figures chant to something unseen. ABC executives expected light suspense. What they got was a film steeped in genuine occult imagery. Crosses inverted, Latin incantations recited without alteration. Religious leaders accused the network of broadcasting black mass rituals. The backlash was fierce, yet curiosity spread even faster. Behind the scenes, star Kate Jackson recalled the eerie mood that haunted the set. The production filmed in an abandoned college in Massachusetts, where strange power outages occurred during night shoots. Crew members joked about curses, but some refused to return after hearing unexplained voices echo in empty hallways. The film's closing scene, where Elizabeth confronts the cult leader, revealed to be one of her teachers, shocked viewers for its psychological cruelty. There was no clean victory, only survival. Despite the outrage, the movie's ratings soared, and it became a cult staple on late-night reruns. A remake in the 90s proved how deeply it had sunk into pop culture. Satan's School for Girls remains one of the earliest TV films to blend horror with social commentary about trust and female independence. It dared to show that evil could wear authority's face, and that sometimes the most terrifying classrooms are the ones that pretend to educate the soul. Number 4. The Legend of Lizzie Borden, 1975. By the mid-70s, audiences thought they had seen every kind of TV horror. Then came The Legend of Lizzie Borden, starring Elizabeth Montgomery, who had just finished years of playing the lovable witch on Bewitched. It became one of the most disturbing transformations in television history. The film dramatized the infamous real-life Borden murders of 1892, in which Lizzie was accused of brutally killing her father and stepmother with an axe. Viewers tuned in, expecting a polite historical retelling. What they got instead was a psychological descent into rage, repression, and madness that pushed network boundaries to the limit. The violence was suggested, not shown, yet it felt unbearable. The sound design, the wet thud of the axe, the heavy breathing, the silent aftermath, made it feel more real than blood ever could. Censors tried to cut entire sections. Producers fought back, arguing that removing the tension would destroy the story's soul. Elizabeth Montgomery's performance stunned critics. She delivered a cold, haunting stare so distant that it erased her sitcom image forever. Many viewers believed the film was cursed. Letters flooded ABC accusing the movie of exploiting murder for ratings, but others praised it for exploring female anger and class hypocrisy in an era when such subjects were taboo. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was chilling. Montgomery insisted on method acting. Crew members claimed she would not speak to anyone between takes. Some even said her eyes changed color during the murder scenes, though this was likely due to lighting tricks. The Legend of Lizzie Borden went on to win awards and carve a permanent mark on the genre. It proved that psychological horror could thrive on network television without a drop of blood. It was not about monsters. It was about the quiet horror of what people hide inside themselves. Number 3. Duel, 1971. Before Jaws, before Close Encounters, before E.T., Steven Spielberg terrified the nation with a TV movie called Duel. The premise was simple. A man driving through the California desert is hunted by an unseen truck driver who turns an ordinary highway into a road of death. But what made Duel unforgettable was its relentless pace and suffocating realism. The film aired on ABC as part of its Movie of the Week program. No one expected much. Then viewers started calling the network mid-broadcast, saying they could not breathe. The sense of dread came not from gore, but from tension. The faceless driver, the growling engine, the roaring desert wind, it all felt too close to real life. Spielberg, at only 24 years old, used techniques unheard of in television. He strapped cameras to moving vehicles, shot long takes on real highways, and used natural light to make every frame sweat. The result was a cinematic experience broadcast into living rooms across America. Censors hesitated over the truck's depiction as a monstrous machine devouring smaller cars. Some saw it as an allegory for industrial America crushing individuality. Critics debated whether it was even horror or something darker, a study of paranoia and masculine fear. Behind the scenes, the production nearly collapsed from heat exhaustion and mechanical failures. Spielberg refused to use stunt doubles for many scenes. The actor Dennis Weaver did most of the driving himself, often at dangerous speeds. Duel became a global phenomenon and convinced studios that Spielberg was destined for cinema. The film's legacy shaped every road thriller that followed, from Joyride to The Hitcher. Duel was proof that horror did not need ghosts or blood to terrify. Sometimes the monster is metal, the sky is endless, and the only sound you hear is the engine that refuses to stop. Number 2. Salem's Lot, 1979. When CBS announced a two-part adaptation of Stephen King's vampire novel, many assumed it would be watered down for primetime audiences. Instead, Salem's Lot became one of the most traumatic viewing experiences of the decade. The story follows novelist Ben Mears, who returns to his hometown, only to discover a growing evil infecting the townspeople. What begins as whispers of strange disappearances turns into a full-scale nightmare when the dead begin to rise. Director Tobe Hooper, known for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, brought raw terror to television. The most infamous scene shows a child floating outside a bedroom window, scratching at the glass, his eyes glowing cold blue. Parents covered their children's faces. ABC affiliates refused to rerun it. Behind the scenes, Hooper fought executives who demanded less violence. He compromised by using suggestion and still managed to create one of the most haunting atmospheres in television history. The production used dim blue lighting fog machines and a chilling minimalist score that made every creak feel like a heartbeat. Actors recalled that the vampire makeup was so disturbing, some extras fainted on set. Crew members reported strange coincidences like equipment malfunctioning whenever scenes involving the vampire Barlow were filmed. Rumors of curses spread quickly. When Salem's Lot aired, the ratings exploded. Critics called it too intense for television, yet impossible to look away from. The show blurred the line between small-screen entertainment and theatrical horror. Decades later, filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro and Mike Flanagan cited it as one of their first nightmares. Salem's Lot proved that horror could live on the small screen and still sink its fangs into your soul. Number 1. Trilogy of Terror, Saw, 1996. At first glance, you might wonder why a film from the 90s ends a list about 70s horror, but there is a reason. Trilogy of Terror 2 was not a sequel in spirit. It was a resurrection of the exact terror the 70s unleashed. When it aired on Showtime in the mid-90s, it revived the same nightmare energy that had haunted the original 1975 version. Directed once again by Dan Curtis and written by the legendary Richard Matheson, it was more brutal, more psychological, and far more daring than network television could ever allow 2 decades earlier. The first story, Graveyard Rats, turned a simple inheritance tale into a descent into claustrophobic madness as a woman murders her husband only to crawl through tunnels infested with human-sized rats. The second story, Bobby, featured a mother who resurrects her dead son through an occult ritual only to face something that is no longer human. The third story rekindled the infamous Zuni doll in He Who Kills, where the tiny hunter returns for revenge. While not a product of the 70s, its spirit belonged entirely to that decade's fearless experimentation. The network system that once censored violence and terror was gone. What remained was pure, unfiltered dread, crafted by the same minds who had broken boundaries 20 years earlier. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers deliberately reused some of the same lighting setups and sound designs from the Saw original trilogy of terror to preserve that eerie, handmade texture. The Zuni doll was rebuilt with updated animatronics, but still looked unnervingly primitive. Actors described shooting the puppet sequences as physically exhausting, since they required dozens of takes to sync every movement. Critics were divided. Some called it too graphic for television. Others hailed it as a long overdue tribute to a lost era when horror could be smart, personal, and merciless. Viewers who had seen the original as children returned now as adults and felt that same cold electricity crawl up their spine. Trilogy of Terror stands as the echo of an era that refused to die. It reminds us that horror does not age. It evolves waiting quietly for a new generation to rediscover the shadows behind their screens. From whispering demons to faceless truck drivers, these TV horror movies from the 70s proved that terror could invade the safety of our living rooms. They blurred the line between sanity and spectacle, between faith and fear. Which one haunted you the most? Tell us in the comments. Like this video, subscribe for more forgotten nightmares, and remember some horror stories were never meant to end.